Welcome to Peer Check. I'm your host, Adam Keating, and today we're talking about how technology and collaboration can help advance shipbuilding. My guest today is Chad Mercer. Chad's a naval architect by trade, has worked in the shipbuilding world for the last 20 years, and is now the head of digital transformation at Genoa Design. Welcome to the show, Chad.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
And Chad, take me back a step before we even get into diving into shipbuilding. When you think about digital transformation for shipbuilding, what does that mean to you?
When I think about digital transformation for shipbuilding, it actually takes me back, I think, to the beginning where Genoa started, really, because innovation is kind of the whole born out of necessity piece, and Leonard Pecourt started the company back in '95, and the whole idea of the internet was just kind of getting really big and popular, right? So that's how far back. But that whole disruption of the internet went. We've got an industry here where people usually move around and, have to go from shipyard to shipyard. Why can't we leverage the internet and allow people to, stay home and work? Mm-hmm. And so that was applying technology to make this big improvement. I mean, that's like the earliest version of digital transformation, for me. And now here we are, however many years later, and we've gone from a 3D model where someone said, hey, give me some part names so I can know how to put a thing together, to modeling light switches and thermostats and running all this data and everything. And so, now we're looking at it through a completely different lens, where you're looking and going, this isn't just about ship design anymore. There's all this data, there's all this process, and there's this technology that we can take and transform it into something completely different. So for me, it's that whole, the people, the process, the technology, and what that's been able to do and what that disruption has allowed us to be able to accomplish.
And where do you think the focus is, like, right now in the industry? There's so many different parts, whether it's moving away from drawings and into models, truly becoming model-based, like getting things into the shipyard and the rest. Where are you seeing the biggest pull and focus on, like, the digital front, the shipbuilding world today?
That's a really good question. I think for me, it really is around the whole data component of it. Like, I was talking to our director of IT yesterday, and I think he told me that we get about 60 gigabytes of change data every 3 hours. Right, like that's a huge amount of data that's being generated. And so you think about the whole shipbuilding process, where you're, creating data, mature it, add to it. So just by putting this whole data lens on that process, it's a whole nother value stream lens now that's on top. And I think, at least for me anyway, that's where the focus should be, is on applying good data management to it and leveraging that data for the full stream of the vessel or the asset, whatever it happens to be, because that even crosses industries, right?
Well, it's one of the interesting parts. I always say shipbuilding's like somewhere between manufacturing and construction. Like, it's not really smack dab in either, in my mind. Like, it's kind of like a building on water, but so complicated that it's actually a lot more like manufacturing than just a building. But there's a whole bunch of stuff that just fits together, which makes it really tricky, right? Because construction projects are typically multi-year, very drawing based, very plan focused. Manufacturing is usually very assembly focused, but you have both those problems, which makes this data problem even worse, because there's thousands and thousands of clashes, thousands and thousands of interfaces. How do you even start to manage like that volume of change data? Like, what do you think teams can be doing to be smarter about that? Is it shifting towards being fully 3D and working in real time together? Is it like integrating all your tools? What do you think is sort of the key to getting people moving in the right direction with just like that volume of information?
I think I think it comes down to being very purposeful in what you're doing, and you hit on something that is really important. It isn't in either one of those. In fact, for me, I think of it almost it's a mega project. You're building this huge mini city, basically, that has to float, and make that work across multiple teams, very specialty skills, and then you need to find some way to build it in an efficient way, which is why we see so much of the manufacturing piece come in, because you kind of go, holy crap, I've got this really big thing to build. How can we get that into manageable, repeatable chunks, because it's going to span years. We've got projects running up to a decade from the time you start to the time to finish. So you have to be very purposeful in how you do it. And I think by approaching the whole process from that data lens,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and trying to make sure that each step is building on the last one. So there's a
Mm-hmm.
bit of a lens shift, I think, that's eventually got to happen. And I think it's happening. The disruption is already happening. It's what I think NSS in Canada, anyway, is helping to drive that. I mean, the whole idea of a stable industry needs you to be able to build on that to get
Mm-hmm.
economies of scale and all that stuff. So for me, it really is looking at that data and what's being generated and making sure that we're always thinking with the future in mind and trying to leverage it and add to it as opposed to going back
Mm-hmm.
to change it all the time. Um, yeah,
I'll,
I
I'll
definitely
ask
think
you.
that's a big part of it.
I'll ask you a loaded question.
Sure.
The world of manufacturing in general right now today is very drawing based, model supported at best. Shipbuilding in particular is very drawing based in terms of how things are actually built. You talked about there being 60 gigabytes of data every every 3 hours. Half of that probably is drawing changes on top of model changes. What do you think the time horizon is for truly building a ship from a 3D model and not needing drawings? What's realistic here?
Oof.
Like, what's a window that's actually going to be possible?
Wow, you're right. That is a loaded question. Boy, I don't think it's going to happen in the next 3 to 5 for sure.
Yeah.
It's a longer term horizon. I think you're going to see some version of drawings for a long, decade plus kind of thing. But I also think there's a lot of change that's going to happen and have to happen quick. Just the world is going to demand it. There's not only all the technology that we're applying to the shipbuilding piece itself. There's all just the world is demanding greener technology, faster, better, more efficient, all this kind of stuff. Automated vessels, like all of this stuff is happening. And what's really interesting for me, coming from the construction side, I guess, is people are wanting to take all that construction bias data now and use for other things, which is going to, kind of in a cycle way, go back and force us to start changing and rethinking how we created to
Mm-hmm.
begin with, right? So I think those kinds of demands are going to force us to rethink how we're creating things. 3D printing. There are yards in the world now 3D printing parts and
Mm-hmm.
whatnot. So right away, that's already starting to shift a little bit away
Yeah.
from having to have the drawings, and everyone's focused towards how can we do it better. And if a person could literally take a 3D model on a tablet or something, assuming a tablet is cost effective and easy, and you could walk it with augmented reality and virtual reality and use it, you know, they're going to get there. It's a matter of that whole shift and the timing of it. Because again,
Yeah.
our life cycle is in quite often 5, 10 plus years, right? So you're not going to
Yeah.
make that switch entirely in the middle of a build program
Yeah.
and take jeopardy on that job, right?
I'd be interested to see, like, not this current set of projects that have already been decided that are happening, but the next wave that come out a few years from now with the bids. I wouldn't be terribly surprised if you start to see requirements in those bid packages then having some level of model focus. Now, I think you've already seen it. I think in some of them now, but digital twin being able to support an as-built model that can actually be used in manufacturing. But I think you might even see the next version, which is like parts of this being leveraged from the model. We're seeing it in aerospace and automotive, where actually one of the biggest tensions in supply chain today is that some of the big companies that are leading the way and this model-based enterprise, model-based definition shift, they want their suppliers to read their 3D data to manufacture the parts to save them the time. They don't want to create the drawings. But their suppliers don't know how to read this data because candidly, it's complex. Like, it's like reading a phone book that is no longer organized. It's kind of like what it equates to with the amount of information you're trying to dissect. So there's going to be smarter ways to take that on. But I could see, a couple years time, you get that next big ship. There's that next, $40 billion program coming up. There's a lot to be gained. Like, you talked about the efficiency and like the economy today. If you can make that change and focus on the ship, and really truly the ship, and it's easier to actually build it, that's billions of dollars down the road.
Yeah, I think it's bound to come. Which program I don't know, but the more that companies are trying to do in-service support and lifecycle management on vessels, I mean, the intent is there, the ask is there to build and use existing data and technology, and it's forcing people to rethink even how do you take that information and visualize it. Standardization of formats and what have you. You've got classification societies that want to be able to leverage the model to make their life and their customers' life, by virtue of that, a little bit easier. So I agree. There's going to be a shift. There's already demands that are happening. I think the timing is going to be a function of, it's going to be the thing that's a driving function, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Because again, back, you're in the middle of building these things. So the ships that are about to be built today were talked about and figured out, 3, 5, whatever years ago.
Yeah.
So there's this whole lag that's going to come because of the sheer magnitude of what's being built. But at the same time, what's kind of exciting, especially for like companies like Genoa, is you do get to try new things as you go for your own internal process. I mean, that's, Colab and Genoa working together. We said, hey, there's a great opportunity here. Let's try this and see how it helps us, and then see what we can go from there, kind of a thing, and we've seen value there.
Yeah. No, I think that's all what it's about, right? It's about how do you take something that's truly waterfall and compress that into little bits of Agile where it's not irresponsible. Because these projects do have an insane volume of requirements that you cannot lose track of. So like pure Agile in its normal sense just does not work. There's a simplified Agile framework, SAFe, that people use. There needs to be a new one for mega projects. I don't know what that's called yet. Maybe you can figure that out for us and let us know next time around. But I'm curious, just on that topic of change and this switch you see happening, who do you think drives it for shipbuilding? Because there's so many different ways I could see it. There's the class, there is the customer, governments and commercial, there's the shipbuilders, and then there's all the companies who are doing the actual design work, who have the ability to be like truly the most innovative ones in the group. Who do you think is like leading that change? And then I got a follow-on question I'll ask you in a moment.
Okay. I actually think the technology itself is what's driving it, and the people within it. So for across the industry as a whole. See, I mean, you think about your phone.
Yeah.
You can do augmented reality, VR, everything on this thing now. And so everyone, your grandmother for FaceTime you, all this kind of stuff. And it's become intuitive, and everyone, thumbs through Facebook or whatever. Yeah. So everyone's expectation has gone up a notch for how easy something can be, how quickly you can get a solution, just even the pace at which someone responds, to a text message, and those expectations. That in and of itself is driving people's expectations then in their work life. And so the industry is then setting expectations based on what technology is pushing. I mean, technology changes at such a rapid pace, faster than what, shipbuilding could certainly keep up with, again, back to the magnitude of scale. So everyone's looking forward and going, holy, here's all these things. What could we be doing? The designers want to design easier. They want to get information faster. So they're demanding it as part of their work life. Shipyards want to be able to build more efficiently and get their input from companies like Genoa faster and better. And they want to engage in that environment more. And how do you do that collaboratively? And you know what I mean? So I think the technology indirectly has been the driver for it, for itself, because of that.
One of the cool parts, actually, like, it's funny you say it that way. When I asked you the question, I wasn't thinking you were going to say that. I was kind of thinking it'd be one part or the other and everyone's pulling along, but that actually kind of makes sense. And if you think about the way shipbuilding has structured itself, especially with like NSS, NSRP, like even the Ocean Supercluster, like these little groups are coming together, which almost marry all those pieces together of the puzzle. And you know what, to be fair, we work with people in this industry, and I do see a lot of the openness to everyone kind of trying to solve it together. And it's not always the same in other industries. It's not always like truly cross-boundary trying to figure it out. It's more like one person decides and others figure out, or a whole bunch of people just start doing it, and then the bigger player says, I need to get involved. Shipbuilding seems like there is a bit of a conscious effort. Like, I know you folks do some collaborations with your customers and other partners in the industry. For people thinking about like how to actually make a change here, NSS, NSRP, where do you even start? Like, how do you get involved? How do you find like these initial partners? Because I know, just talking, you mentioned Leonard at the beginning. Like, he introduced me a while ago to some players there, and it seems like everyone's willing, everyone's wanting to help. How do you get started? Is it literally just as simple as reaching out to someone and getting involved, or is there more to it than that?
I definitely think there's a bit of the showing up part of it, and building a relationship is huge. I mean, the industry, shipbuilding, as much as we build big things, and it's global, it's not massive, especially in North America. Um, it's big risk because you're building this really big thing and you're going through all this iterative design process and what have you. And so I think there's definitely the building relationship part, getting out there to say, hey, we're here and here's what we can do to help. But I think the other half of that is also around mindset. If you're showing up with an unbiased view to try and help solve a problem, to drive innovation and remove a pain point, that kind of thing, instead of necessarily showing up with here's my answer. Mm-hmm. If you're really showing up to go, hey, we think we understand some of your problem. Let's learn more about it and see what we might be able to do to help. Mm-hmm. That kind of mindset, I think, is the biggest thing you could do to try and influence and become part of that change. Because there is an openness to it. I mean, everybody wants to do better and everybody wants to improve it. And industry is demanding it. So I think definitely the mindset piece and building relationship with folks.
And it's pretty much the same as when you actually are on the contract. It's all about that relationship. And then even internal, right? It's about the relationships you're building cross-functionally. You're talking about structures, you're talking about electrical, you're talking about piping systems. Like that is a constant balance of like, how do you make this all work together at one time? I want to talk a little bit, like take this from the industry lens of what's changing there and think about what a company can actually do themselves to actually be better. And I think we talked a lot about collaboration and like just like really being open to new ideas, being a big part of that. Before we jump into like how to do that well with a team, one really unique thing about Genoa is you've built this Genoa Academy that I think you're very proud of as a company, have done a lot with. What is the Genoa Academy? What is it?
So the Genoa Academy, that's something that we started a number of years ago. I can't exactly remember when, but the industry as a whole, there's a shortage of skilled labor, right? So we had to figure out how can we reasonably scale, which we have. How do you get people up to speed, and how do you develop them and put a focus on people? I mean, at the end of the day, definitely we're trying to leverage technology and be data centric in our decisions and purposeful, but it's all people. You're using all the stuff to help mobilize a pile of people to achieve a goal. And the Genoa Academy is our development, capacity to be able to bring people in, onboard them into the business, teach them leadership skills, teach them how to model structure. And it's our way, I guess, of trying to tackle that problem or that pain point of, the industry doesn't have a whole lot of people. How do we bring people in, get them up to speed quickly, support them to meet those expectations, convert people from other industries? Not because there's not enough people coming out of school in naval architecture and marine systems alone to satisfy it. And you got really talented, intelligent, brilliant people that you could bring in from civil, from, electrical of buildings and all kinds of things, convert their knowledge and their skill set to align to put it into a ship.
And you folks are doing like everything from getting people up to speed on Genoa to your tools and technology. It's a really interesting way of taking the first part of what we talked about, which is like institutionalizing technology change broadly, and then also baking it into like just the behaviors and like the day-to-day of your team. Because then you start getting people thinking, you get one of those 10 people puts their hand up with some other brilliant idea. And you then start, like I know we've talked about you folks using 3D scanners to do potential jobs. We've talked about different data integrations and data plays and analyzing quality data. We've talked about all these things. And those all came from employees thinking of like, okay, this part of my job could be better if we did that. But I think the Academy is like such a beautiful sort of unique thing that you folks had built that that's probably important for a lot of people to do. Like we're considering at Colab, like, do we need to build something more formal where people kind of go through it? They get to meet people and they do it all. But it's a really cool way to think about, how do you actually help the industry with technology? Is building almost like a little technology academy and getting people acquainted with, here's what it is today, here's what it could be in the future. How many people have gone through the academy now, do you think? Because I know Genoa's after growing a ton in the last 4 years. Like, it's got to be hundreds of people at this point, I'd imagine.
There's a couple of hundred for sure. I mean, we're 270 plus today. And when we started the academy, we probably would have been around about 40. So everybody has gone through something in the academy, even those first few. So yeah, hundreds of people have gone through and done something, whether it's leadership training or emotional intelligence training or structure training or whatever. everybody has gone through something with the academy.
And you said it really well at the beginning. You said, for me, it's more about the people, the process, and the technology and digital transformation. I think that's actually one of the best investments you can make in your people, is like actually being very prescriptive about we're putting time, resources, and value on making it better for the things you need to do. And that comes back around full circle, not just in their performance and the rest, but like, give you an example. When we worked with you folks, one of your designers actually recorded a video, sort of just without any being asked, on how to use Colab. And that just became something they did. And that happens more and more and more, right? Like, you can't make that stuff up. You can't ask, like, even if you ask someone to do that, it's not going to be as good as when someone just feels like the urge to help other people because it's there. So it's a really beautiful little channel of knowledge, which I think that's actually one of the main things in making transformation happen, is having people want to be part of a change. Really.
Oh, absolutely. I think the people element of digital transformation, even though I know it's digital, is the number one thing. Like, you can have all the best technologies, you can have all the best processes, you can figure it out. If nobody wants to use it, if no one's bought into it, they're not going to use it, not in the same way. And you're definitely not going to get all of that organic, voluntary participation and improvement, right? I hadn't heard that story. That's really cool to hear. But that really says a lot about that individual's buy-in, and that there's something they're getting, and they feel like there's a value, they're valued, and they're a part of the change, right? And they see an opportunity to contribute, and that it's open to them to do so. And that's really important for me, someone who's been with the company a really long time, that's still there, because that's part of, the Genoa story for me. It has been it's that openness, and that, that environment where it's safe to put your hand up and engage in stuff and share ideas and strive for continuous improvement. So to go from when I started almost 20 years ago with the company, and there was 20 of us or something, to where we are now, and to still have those that's something I'm very proud of.
So I'm going to go deeper on that. So like, we started here at technology. What does this all mean? What is the industry looking like? There's obviously a lot of big things coming. We boiled it back here to, the people side of this is where people are really investing. And it's just being driven by technology and people, really, and opportunity. Eventually there'll be regulations, class will get involved, customers will make rules. Like, it'll eventually get to a point where it's just required. But the real innovation's happening now at that level. One thing really unique about Genoa, since I know you so well, is the culture and values on top of this academy that are really making it like a special place to work. And I think anybody look at your website, seeing publicly, can feel that. What does that actually mean, though? Like, most companies today will say they'll have like a mission statement or have values, and like, I don't know if they fully truly live them every day. Whereas like, I feel that when I talk to you folks, that there's like a unified set of values that people live by. Like, what are Genoa's values, and why are they so ingrained? Like, why is it something that people actually latch onto, come to you for? How did that happen?
That's an interesting question. And so your mission and your purpose and stuff sometimes changes and evolves, and it will, like Genoa's has over time and whatnot. The values, though, they don't, not really, not very often. They're kind of the root of who you are, same as an individual. Your own values drive you, right? And I think the big difference, at least, from my perspective, was when we set those, which was a number of months affair back in, I think, 2013 or something. It took us months to ground on what they were and the wording. Every little word had meaning, and it wasn't about describing who we wanted to be. It was really trying to align on who we were. And I think the effort that went into that to really say, this is what we are. It's not who we're going to be in 10 years or anything like that. This is who we are. That's what made it resonate, because it was honest, it was genuine, it's relatable. The first one on our list is putting people first, live well. There's a list of them that we definitely put into every decision that's made, and try to focus on. And it's something we're looking at this year to go, let's look at our values and see, is all that still stacking up, and let's put a mirror in front of ourselves and make sure, are they still true? And if not, where do we need to make tweaks, right? But yeah, that to me, that's the part of it, is don't describe who you want to be. Who are you? What's important? And then try to keep that as much as is reasonably possible in front of mind when you're making your choices.
Yeah.
And people who come and stay will stay because of those core pieces, right? and feeling it.
I agree. And I think in digital transformation lens, like the values can make you can build a really good company around good values, clear purpose, and a good game plan. Like you can build a really good business. To do something like we're talking about here, which is take a good business, a really strong business, and then start changing an industry, like true digital transformation, true change. Like even forget the buzzword in general, like making the next step of evolution happen here. It then takes a one layer more, I think, on the values, and it's almost like beliefs. We talk a lot about it in our plan. Like one of your beliefs, is embracing technology to make it as effective possible for your engineering team. And that's not a belief everyone has. Like it sounds obvious, but a lot of people are not willing to spend money on technology to make them better at doing their job. And that's like a fundamental competitive advantage, I think, for Genoa and others that embrace it. What other beliefs do you think you folks have? Like, I think being stuck in the status quo is something you're like always challenging, but like, have you guys got to that level yet where you're mapping out, from a change perspective, what do we really believe in?
I think that's a really good question. I need to think about that for a second. I think we've talked a lot about where we want to go.
Yeah.
And what we see as the opportunities and where we can add value and how we can contribute. How, we're in some ways we're becoming a technology company that does shipbuilding.
Yeah.
Right. And just I think it's the recognition of how big technology is, how important it's going to be, how that's going to play and on people and the whole connection between the two. I think the belief in that and the two things working together is the part that we've viewed, and at least from my perspective, and in leveraging that going forward to improve the industry, to find our opportunity to make a difference.
Yeah, we actually just went through as a collab. We're rethinking product planning, go-to-market strategy, everything. Going back to, what are our beliefs in the world? Same thing you said, what do you see it looking like in 5 or 10 years? But like, what are the pillars of that belief that even like tie back to our values? Like a really simple one would be like, we actually want to build software that the end user likes to use. Sounds simple, but if you look at the NPS for almost every single CAD PLM product on the market today, they're not very good when you compare it to like a typical SaaS tool that we would sell to a sales and marketing team that's like purpose built. You've got NPS scores that are 90 that are like, almost impossible to believe they're that high. And then you've got NPS scores that are like negative 80. And it's like the people hate using it, but they do it because it fixes a problem, right? Like it fixes a problem.
Yeah.
That's like one of our fundamental beliefs is we want to build something that makes people happy. It's hard, but it guides some of our decisions. And it's similar for you. Like one of yours being technology means you invest even when it is difficult because it's going to pay off in the long term. And I think that's super important. I'm curious on just the last couple of years, you've grown so much. You've tackled the pandemic. What have been like a couple of like the digital things that you folks have done smartly that have helped? Like you mobilized a full team home at one point, but like how did you make this shift? What are a couple of like the key takeaways over the last couple of years of quick wins in the digital world for shipbuilding?
I think in terms of that whole shift and the big takeaways, kind of goes back to where we started, right? Is the whole innovation is born out of necessity. The internet piece, there was this, disruption, and we said, okay, let's embrace that disruption. What can we do with it, and how do we work through it? COVID happened. We all had to deal with it. We had to figure out, okay, how do we move forward? You can, what's the solution? And very purposefully looking at, okay, we got to put our team first because we got to figure out how are they going to be healthy? They're going to be okay. Can we do this? How can we leverage the technology that we've got? How do we make sure we can deliver to our customer and make sure that they're getting what they need? And I think recognizing that it was a massive change as well, like because it was a huge big thing. And then so we deliberately put things in place. We put a COVID response team in place to look at all that stuff kind of holistically, and focus on how can we leverage technology to help us do this, and be really open and honest. And I think having some realistic expectations and a bit of give and take with your team too, right? And going, hey, look, we don't have all this stuff figured out, but here's the things we're going to try and do, and let's work together and try to figure this out. And here we are, however many years later, and still going strong. I mean, we recruited 100 people, I think it was, through over the pandemic, over the course of a year. So we found a way,
That's awesome. Yeah. I I've watched a lot of that journey, and I've been impressed the whole way through it. Like moving home, even just like most of the industry in general wasn't ready for even video calls, to be honest. Like that was a big difference. Like being in person, think about 2 years ago. 2 years ago, if I wanted to talk to an engineering manager, director, VP, I was flying to see them because they didn't want to talk to me on phone. Now it's actually the opposite. They don't want me flying to see them because they don't want me taking several hours of their day. They want to talk to me for 20 minutes. And then when they're ready and we're ready to go build something cool, then I fly and see them. But it's like a fundamental shift.
So that's really interesting that you mentioned that, because there's a couple of observations for myself like that too. Like we've got, people in different locations here, Vancouver, here in Newfoundland, Vancouver, in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and down in the US. And one of the things that COVID actually did was it leveled the playing field, right? So everybody is now contributing through a virtual medium. The geographic bias has gone because everyone was through that medium. It made you a lot more conscious and considerate of what other folks are trying to do when they're trying to communicate digitally. We all talk about the things that you didn't have in that environment. There was some good stuff that did come like that, right? And we that's the stuff that you got to cling on to now out of that whole experience is what did actually work, and how do you keep those pieces? I know for myself, I was traveling back and forth to Vancouver to the customer site, every 2 months or so. And over 2 years, everything became these video conferencing calls. So it makes you kind of reevaluate and go, do you need to fly that much anymore? Everyone's adopted now the technology as you described. How much more efficient can we all be as people and in our lives and in work-life balance and stuff now as a response to that too?
It all goes back though, right, to transformation. People didn't realize that happened. You said like a moment ago, like innovation happens out of necessity. And I think we just had one of those inflection points. Like COVID drove necessity, which forced people to stop flying so much, forced people to be virtual, forced shipbuilding, manufacturing companies to be global, forced us to think about supply chains again, all those things. I think there's a second reset coming based on the economy sometime in the next few years. There is going to be, we're already feeling it. Like you can already feel the inflation. You can already feel the pressure to perform. And we're seeing it across every single customer segment. Whether it's because of supply chain problems or just literally margins, you're seeing that pressure to perform, which is going to create, I think, winners and losers in terms of who embraces technology and is ready for it. Because the second wave of this is going to be different. It's going to be like very monetary. There won't be support for it. Like there won't be ways to fix it. It's going to be tricky and tangly. And I think doing these things now where the behaviors are shifting and being nimble and thinking about it is ultimately the way to go, because like you said, it comes back to people, technology, process, and being able to weather the storm is sort of a summation of how good you're doing the three of those things, I think.
And you think about Newfoundland culture, and the whole way that we became a province was through necessity and through working through those challenges. So you kind of hopefully rely on some of that I guess grit to help go through those changes. But you're right, there's another inflection point coming. There's another change coming. I hadn't really thought about it being an economic one, but you're right. And the shipbuilding industry as a whole has been a boom bust industry, right? So we've seen the bust thing and how economic pressures can come. So there's some takeaways from that too. Like what successful companies who ride out the bust part are the ones that catapult up for the next boom part. And so if you keep building on that helps build the strengths that you can use for whatever the next inflection point happens to be.
Well, it's really important at this point right now to be investing in being ready for that. Because to give you an example, there's a VP I was talking to last week, and we're talking about, how can we help them transform parts of, how they're doing design review and these types of things. And they're ready to go. Like they're ready to invest in this. And the short term, they have a supply chain problem. Like today, there's a supply chain problem, which pumped the brakes on, okay, should we fix this now and how we work? And that's a good decision to focus and get it done. But then you think about what is going to be the impact of that in 2 years' time when we don't have the choice and you're trying to scramble. It's the same thing we all just went through when we all slammed Microsoft Teams. Luckily, Microsoft Teams is a pretty easy switch. But when you think about switching, like how you actually engineer, how you actually think and solve problems, that's a much bigger thing than where you type a chat message. That's what I think is like the key here, is like identifying that now and seeing that if you get ahead of it and it doesn't go down, the economy doesn't tank, or don't tank, it's a competitive advantage. And if you do it now and it does tank, it's going to be the thing that keeps the company alive. It's no different than the recession, right? In 08, like that's like really good companies came out of that because they were prepared in some way or another to deal with it. Because you're right, it is very ebbs and flows, and it's not just shipbuilding. It's just shipbuilding is more obvious because it's much more 1 and 0. Like, is there a ship or is there not?
And it's so big. So
other industries,
people just need a pile,
right?
not a lot of the mega project thing, right?
Yeah, you see it. You see it in oil and gas. You see it like you're going to see it in everything. It's even just consumer behavior. You think about how that changes. Price of gas is going to change consumer behavior dramatically if it stays in this range right now, because it's just not feasible for the average household to be paying that kind of money to live that kind of way. You stop going on road trips, you stop buying new things, and then once that starts to happen, there's a full ripple effect, and that comes right back to the engineering teams, innovation groups, and like who is ready to do this thing 5 times faster or 10% more efficient or whatever it might be, because it's very hard to go from 0 to 1 when you're not practicing like that continuous improvement mindset when it comes to actually adopting technology.
Absolutely. And that's the one thing I'll say about the NSS program. And I think for me personally, I really bought into the vision of NSS and building a stable industry in the country. That kind of foresight and that kind of investment, it takes a while to see, reaping the benefits, but it's all geared towards a stable industry. And so all the stuff that you have to do to be stable takes a long-term view, which means you kind of got to start being prepared for where dips and stuff come, or you won't be stable. You know what I mean? And when we got involved in it, my personal view on it was NSS was a catapult and a way for us to build a bench strength, build a capability, and build our business, build the industry. I really, really do believe in what that program was meant to do, and I think those things are going to help shipbuilding. For all those that buy into it and all those that are using it that way, it's going to really help with that change when it comes.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, you take the combination of like understanding, embracing technology, the people, and the collaboration side, putting that together in a way where relationships start to build and people are seeing what the future might look like, what those beliefs might be, and really just invest and commit to it. That ultimately is what's going to make, it's going to weather the next storm. That next big wave that comes in, you're going to be able to ride the wave instead of getting crushed by it. And that's ultimately what's going to make the difference here. So, Chad, I really appreciate the time. I really appreciate the insights. I'm super excited to see what Genoa does in the next number of years. And I also hope to see in the next, maybe it's 5 or 10. Maybe we get out of drawings altogether in the shipbuilding world, save you folks a full forest, and make it twice as effective. So thanks for joining us today.
Awesome. Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. I will say I'm really thrilled to see what you guys are doing, to see what technology sector in Newfoundland is doing in Canada as a whole, and how that's, for me personally, how that's helping us in what we're trying to do in our industry as well. So, looking forward to keep driving and sharing and, building a better future for us.
Awesome. Thanks, Chad.